Hello, it's Mrs. Shuver, and I hope you've had a great start to your morning. So let's get going on our lesson today. I'm kind of excited about this lesson because I think it's fun personally. So we're going to add integers using counters, or I might refer to them as chips because that's how I've learned to talk about them. So this is just another way to add integers, and hopefully this is just another tool that you can go to that might be helpful on your journey to learning these. So we're going to start out with the first half. For positive numbers, we're going to model them using an open circle if you don't have colors to work with. If you have a yellow marker, crayon, or colored pencil, I prefer to use that because I'm a visual learner and I like seeing the colors. It really pops out to me. And then a yellow highlighter would work. In fact, we're going to also talk about a highlighting method later on when we get to bigger numbers. For negative numbers, we can model with a filled in circle. So if you have a pencil, we can use a filled in circle for negatives and an open circle for positives. Or again, if you have access to crayons or markers or colored pencils, we're going to use red to model negative numbers. And again, we could also use a pink highlighter, which again is what we're going to do later on when we talk about our third method. So the directions say model the following numbers. So the first number I see is positive 3. So I'm going to use 3 open circles, and this is going to be my model of the number 3 using counters. Or if I have access to crayons or markers, I can model this using 3 yellow counters. Or there's one other method. We could use a highlighter. So if you have a highlighter, you can also use 3 yellow counters. So next, we want to model our negative 4. So we would model that using filled in circles if we have a pencil. So this would be a model of negative 4. Or again, if we have colors, we could model it with our red. And if we didn't have colors, we could use our crayons. We could also use our highlighters. So this would be a model. All of them are models of negative 4. Now here's a kind of an odd concept. We're going to model 0, but we need to use counters in order to do it. So here's what 0 would look like. I would put a positive, and then I draw a negative, because those two undo each other. So if I use a number line below to model what just happened, I would be going from 0 to 1. So I would go over to positive 1, that's a model of 1, but then I'd turn back around and go negative 1, and I'd end back at 0. So this is a model of 0 using chips. So now, since we do have colors, or if you have colors rather, we're going to now draw a model of what it would look like using our red and yellow chips. So I would model a positive chip, and then I'd model a negative chip, and together these two would be 0. It's known as a 0 pair because there's 2 of them, but they add up to 0. And once again, we could also go back to our highlighters. I could use my yellow highlighter and my pink highlighter, and once again together, that would make another 0 pair. So what we just did is we talked about additive inverse. Now we have a name for these. These are known as additive inverses of each other. So when a number and it's blank, and you may have noticed all of these are opposites, are added. So let's write that opposites. We use the opposites. When we add them, it turns out the sum or the result is 0. So if you hear the word additive inverse, it is referring to numbers that we could put together, but their sum is 0. So at the bottom of the page, it asks us to model 0 using 4 counters. I have to use 4 counters. They want me to use 4 of them. So I'm going to start with a positive. So I'm going to use my positive, and I'm just going to model it with an open circle. But in order to make that 0, because right now I have 1, I need its opposite. So I'm going to put a filled in. So I now have 2 chips or 2 counters, but the sum right now is 0. So if I do that again, if I put a positive counter and I put a negative counter, oh, I have 4 counters, but this is a 0 pair, so it equals 0, and this is another 0 pair. So if I want to see what that looks like on the number line, I moved up, and let's go back, look at my pen. I see 2 positives, so this would be a positive 2, and I see 2 negatives, this would be a negative 2, and indeed I ended up back at 0, so they're additive inverses. This time, let's go with colors. I'm going to model a positive and a negative. Right now I have 2 counters, another positive and another negative. I'm up to 4 counters, but I need another positive and another negative. So now they ask me to model using 6 counters. I see 6 counters, but the value is 0, another 0, and another 0. So I have 6 counters, but the value is 0. So let's turn to the next page. So now we're going to try to use this method to model expressions. And it says below each expression, model with the correct counters or chips. If the expression has different signed integers, we're going to cross out as many pairs, a yellow and a red or any other form you've modeled it, as 0 pairs because it becomes a 0. If they're the same signs, then we're going to count the number of counters and keep the sign. And we don't want to forget, at the end, we want to write the sum or the answer. So we're going to start by modeling -8. So I'm going to choose, and by the way, it's probably a good idea to organize your chips. I like to put them in pairs. That makes it a little bit easier when I'm trying to count them or cross them off. So that's what -8 looks like. +2, again, is yellow, so I would model 2. Now that I have 2 separate numbers that I've modeled, this is what it's going to look like. I am now going to try to get rid of as many 0 pairs as possible. Now, you can see they're different colors or different signs, so I'm going to cross off 1 0 pair there. So a yellow and a red make a 0. Another 0 pair with the second red and the second yellow, and what I have left indicates my answer. And what I love about the colors is I can see the red, which means that I have a negative answer, and I can count 6 chips. So this is -6. The sum is -6. Now let's go ahead and try working on the next example. And this time, if you don't have colors, you're just fine. I'm just going to model this using my pencil. And so I'm going to start with -5. And again, on the front, negatives are represented by filled in circles. And the number -5 would be modeled with 5 negative circles, or counters rather. And -2 would be modeled with 2 negative counters. So this time, I can't cross anything off because there's not opposites here. They're all the same. And in that case, I just add them together and keep the sign. So I can see all of them are negative because I've filled in circles. So I'm going to write my answer as negative. I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is -7. So let's try our final problem. This time I'm going to choose to model it with my highlighter. So I see a +3, and that would be a yellow color. And then I see -8, so I would use my pink highlighter. And again, I like to put them in pairs. That way, it's easier for me to organize my thoughts. Oh, I see different colored counters. So that means I can make 0 pairs out of these. So I'm going to cross off 1 0 pair. I can make a second 0 pair. I'm taking opposites. And I can make a third 0 pair. So my answer is all of the leftover chips or counters. And I can see that they're pink, which we're using as our negative. And I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the answer is -5. I hope you enjoy this method. We're going to practice this and our vectors and number lines tomorrow. And we'll see which method you prefer. Have a good afternoon.